a significant reduction again. However, let me support what our colleagues just said, that we have seen a growth in passenger transportation in some directions. As for the seaports, apart from Caspian and Baltic Sea, there has not been a tremendous drop in cargo shipments. However, altogether, in 9 months, we've experienced a 25% drop reduction. But as to Baltic ports, around 62% reduction. Azov and the Black Sea, container and other cargoes transportation, there has been a significant reduction as well. However, there is a development of the throughput through the border crossing points with Turkey, running through Georgia, Armenia, thus crossing our border crossing points, and then with Turkey. When it comes to the key areas, the experts forecast a further growth in the eastern sphere, especially between Russia and China. Container flows have grown by 17% roughly. When it comes to general flow of cargoes, it's around 4% due to logistics and infrastructure limitations. By 2024, 19–20%, that's the forecast. And it will certainly depend upon resolution of the issues associated with BAM railway, namely Baikal-Amur railway section, and crossings in the regions beyond Baikal. In Azov and Black Sea area, growth is around 4%. By 2024, hopefully it will be around 25%. The dynamics will grow. The southern direction towards Iran, too. And our colleagues mentioned that we have to finalize construction of railways in Iran and build up the capacities and facilities in Iran, including ports. Generally speaking, of what is promising is that there's an issue of competition with other routes which run beyond Russia, like TRANSTEC, with the sea routes and logistics, which receive support from China. The direction towards Turkey, Iran, and the seaways, which our companies have been using, there are some issues associated with the improved digitalization, with the transparency of customs clearance, and the process of clearance of cargoes in such acute conditions is insufficient. The issue is the cost of transportation, of freight transportation, especially insurance, associated with decisions of the European Commission, and the risk which has been assigned to this route. Creation of new logistics centers for the distribution of cargoes along our key transportation routes have been discussed in many documents. Let me add to this that the crisis issues and the hybrid war, so to say, is not a short-term problem. We need to think about new routes, as it was mentioned by Andrei, going to Asia-Pacific. Also, Kızıl-Kuragina direction is a route running towards Mongolia and China. This route has been discussed for 10–12 years, and we have to build the new transportation network, the whole chain, since we'll not be able to transport such amount of cargoes via BAM railway towards the Far East. Then Azerbaijan-Iran area, probably running through Kazakhstan with the joint efforts we have to look at tackling this issue of the growing volume of cargoes to be transported. The transportation industry demonstrates higher strength than the other industries, and it is probably one of the driving points of the Russian economy. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Andrei. Also, a couple of questions. Perhaps the speakers of the plenary sessions have questions to ask. Andrei, since our colleagues are still thinking, my question is, which are the promising strategies are ahead of the management of the transportation and logistics companies? Do they have to focus on resolution of the acute issues only, or there is a need, and perhaps you would recommend also, to switch to a network interaction or cooperation of companies in terms of management of the supply chains? Which is the promising strategy in the conditions, in the current complicated conditions, when companies do say that it's high time to restructure our business processes? We have to cover the gaps now. What is your position? What is your recommendation to the management of such companies in terms of strategy development? First of all, to my mind, FESCO and other companies have been demonstrating high flexibility and high pace in terms of rebuilding the routes, since they're building from scratch towards Turkey and down south. We heard Andrei, and we see the promising routes there towards Asia. And this implies combined routes, including seaways, including railways and logistics, Russian ports. One would mention different networks. Now, network implies cooperation of different companies, and thus linking the Russian railways with various infrastructure and seaports. This is the key area. Another issue is insurance of sea cargoes. The decisions have been made, and Eurasian Union company is now to get registered and to start operating to cover the Asian region. Because without the insurance process, our export and import of cargoes will face significant issues. And perhaps the business has to approach the state, the government, in terms of development of the routes, the promising routes. Kızıl-Kuragina route, for instance, which I mentioned, developing towards Mongolia, and building the new transportation routes running through Iran, not only the western branch, but Sergei mentioned it, 12 million tons will be insufficient, and we have to look for other areas, other directions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Indeed, indeed. Andrei is absolutely correct. I support him that we are at maximum coordinated here I mean business and infrastructure organizations and institutions that ensure that goods move between Russian railroads, federal customs, etc. The coordination is at full scale with the Della Group, with Port, with us. We are all in the same boat. And of course, the competition is there, how you can do without competition in the business. But at present, we work rather as not rather competitors, but colleagues. And in a collective effort, we find solutions to the problems. With the Federal Customs Service, we launched projects to speed up customs clearance, so special procedures are introduced. So we have a pilot project together to have digital seals on electronic and digital seals on containers. Together with the railroads, we are launching a fast way of shipping off goods. And now we have doubled container trains. They are now up and running. So it means that the train capacity is increased twofold. So we do coordinate, and the main idea that I want to reinforce that it's not wild competition with us. No, we are all in the same boat, and we need to reinforce our collective spirit, I would say. Andrei Nikolaevich, I would like to ask for a clarification. In Sergei Pavlov's presentation and in Andrei Severilov's FESCO and Russian railroad speakers mentioned the priority in coordination and in building cooperation. So do you have any wishes addressed to companies in this light? So, of course, you mentioned this, but some say we will just coordinate at the logistic and transportation market, but some say that we need to move into cooperation, which is tighter, and coordinate not only in the transport and logistic market, but tie in agricultural and industrial companies, even households, to be connected. What will be your recommendation to forum participants in this respect? Thank you for your question. Well, Andrei Vladimirovich mentioned exactly that when he spoke about cooperation and the collective effort which unite the transportation companies like FESCO, Russian railroads, customs. So it is important that these extreme steps and measures would shape the model that is speedy for moving the goods. Your question about the industry. Well, Sinara and other industrial companies are present, and they offer a new rolling stock, to be run on railroads. Those, cargo owners, mostly metallurgical companies and agricultural companies in Russia, they are searching for new ways. And probably they do have challenges both in the metallurgical industry and in the coal industry, how to make the right queue of cargoes, sending them to the east and identify the most optimal volumes for transshipping metal goods or coal, or shift the balance towards containers rather. So, and we need to coordinate and cooperate both top down and down top. And we need to also cooperate with the customs, with the Russian customs. We must ensure both the comfort level and safety and security, because we all now ride on trains. In the Russian railways, we saw that passenger traffic was reducing, but now we see it growing. Thank you, Andrei Nikolaevich. I'm giving the floor to Maxim Gennadievich Filimonov, who is Vice President of the Delo Group. Maxim Gennadievich Filimonov, what is your attitude? What is your Delo Group response to the new challenges? How you build new relations with your new customers, clients, companies within the group that are engaged in the single supply chain? The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Oleg Nikolaevich. And thank you for inviting me to join such a intense conversation. Indeed, it is easy because the main content was already delivered by previous speakers. So that's an easy task on one hand to speak after them. But on the other hand, the entire topic is very complex and big scale and goes far beyond the frameworks that we traditionally discuss at TRANSTEC forum. Well, I will start by saying that, in our opinion, the key characteristic of the current Russian market is how to find the right word? Like-mindedness, I would say. And we see this unification of both governmental institutions, market participants, infrastructure operators, companies, and the railroad monopoly. So we all discuss the same challenge, and we do not argue, because everyone sees that the priority are to be developed when it comes to routes. We identify infrastructure elements to be developed. So we think alike, and there were no discussions this year about tariff decisions made this year and made for the next year. Why? Because everyone understands our single target, and everyone works toward reaching this target. And also the state this year, of course, after the well-known geopolitical challenges, we see that the state plays a very efficient, sensible, and responsible role, being a good partner for the business. The Deputy Minister for Transportation, Mr. Ivanov, spoke earlier, and he's in a tight contact with the market. So, and this is the situation of the previous next months, which ensures that business finds an efficient partner in our governmental structures. Coming back to Andrei Nikolaevich, appreciation of the transportation complex level. And Andrei Vladimirovich mentioned the need for higher container content. So let me rephrase a well-known saying that the economy is to be developed through infrastructure development plus containerization of the entire country. So several months ago, we discussed the barriers and how we go above them. And then we reviewed the entire chain. We see clients are there. We can find financial sources. Containers can be purchased, and we can find a substitute for foreign sea operators who left. But the main bottleneck is our infrastructure. The state does a lot and is very responsible in finding the proper solutions for this challenge. This year, we see an interesting tool for infrastructure development planning, roadmaps for international transport corridors. There there are three: east, west, the Azov and Black Sea areas, and north to south. This is the first and comprehensive attempt on the part of the state to develop systemically the infrastructure by implementing different elements and having many inputs into a very complicated equation. In our opinion, and knowing the already announced plans and the targets and goals that we have and will have, of course, we will run into bottlenecks. The throughput of the entire corridor is determined by the most narrow section. So the roadmap is here to remove bottlenecks, and we want to be more ambitious and even more aggressive in developing our eastern infrastructure, not just the ground, the region, but border crossing, because the demand for infrastructure is many times higher than the supply. We know the situation in the Far East when it comes to containers. Our company and FESCAR, we have over 6,000 containers in TEU, both for export and import. They are on the ground, just standing there, because export does not have time to arrive in time, and import doesn't have time to properly leave the border. And this is a bottleneck. We see that in Novorossiysk we must increase the railroad capacity because the volumes are actively arriving from Turkey. We keep saying that we need to ensure the foreign trade of Russia, its interests. And we somehow forget or do not focus on the transit potential of Russia. It is still here. We know the habitual and usual corridors from east to west when China goods go to Europe. But there are other opportunities. Kazakh coal from Kazakhstan going through Russia, through Russia's northwest, and it replaces habitual European markets. Russia loses them, but Kazakhstan takes over these markets, and they provide volumes for railroad and for stevedoring company. Well, it's a difficult logistical task to redirect coal from east to west and find the rail transportation capacity. Uzbekistan announced is the most ambitious program to increase automobile manufacturing, twofold up to 500,000 cars, of course, primarily destined to Russia. But some transits goes through Russia, of course, mostly through the Far East, and they face the same challenge of overstocking in storages at ports in Russia's Far East. So these are major challenges. They were mentioned by colleagues, but I will underline them. We need to have a balance when it comes to loading our corridors and at all our regions, basins associated with the seas. At Northwest, we will see the 65, almost 70% decline, but it is less than could have been, because we had a high base in January and February where the growth was 10 and month to month or to the previous year, a 10% growth. And therefore, we dropped, the base dropped by 75%, not 95%, if you consider month to month. And we need to find new volumes to Russia's northwest, and together with FESCA company, we see how we can bring routes from Southeast Asia to Russia's northwest. The economy is not as evident, and I will join our FESCA group colleagues and call upon our clients, be more ambitious and brave, try new logistic routes. For us, logistic companies, it will be a stimuli to develop new routes, because we can't bring new ships or build new logistic centers without the client's demand. If all clients demand just the same route going from east to west, how we shall develop the new routes from north to south by the deep sea and by land to Russia's northwest. One more thing is
One more thing is that we have new challenges, of course. I mean, geopolitical challenges. Another challenge is the world recession, which may impact world logistics, global logistics altogether, and our logistics as well, including our plans for development of the sea leverage. And we certainly will have to evaluate our risks more thoroughly, to evaluate the economy factors, and without the support of customers and companies, actually just over the wall there's an industrial forum underway, and colleagues are discussing the ways of developing, and import substitution tools are being discussed, so we need to be more ambitious. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maxim. We will switch to other issues. Let me give the floor to the representatives of the Iranian delegation. Let me give the floor to Aliriza Peymanpak, Deputy Minister of Industry, Mines and Trade, Head of Trade Development Organization of Iran. Please, Aliriza, the floor is yours. In the name of the Almighty God, God Almighty, I am greeting all participants of the forum, the distinguished participants of the export and import activities, both from Russia and Iran and other countries. As you all know, the logistics issue, the issue of transportation of cargoes, shipments, is of acute importance, large scale. And certainly the interaction of Iran and Russia could be considered from both facets, namely increasing the trade between the two countries, considering the recent geopolitical phenomena and sanctions which were applied against Russia. I'm sure that in such conditions, the trading throughput between our two countries will represent growth, will demonstrate growth. Multiple times, leaders of our countries focused our attention on the need to develop the trade between our countries and participation of delegations of both countries at international fora were aimed at building new contacts, business contacts. Apart from that, it is of great importance the issue of logistics and the supply chains. The main topic which we consider in terms of logistics and shipments is the MTK North-South, that corridor where both Iran and Russia can perform a role of regulators of this corridor, of this important corridor for transportation of cargoes to its clients, customers. Until recent, the issue of north-south corridor has been discussed multiple times in different levels between different countries. We have 6 ports in the Caspian Sea, and the throughput of all those ports is around 3 million tons. Our aim is to build upon it, increase it. In the Persian Gulf, our ports are much bigger. We have 12 ports there, and their throughput can reach up to 230 million tons. In recent 7 months, 5 million tons of cargoes were transiting through Iran to the northern ports. And currently, unfortunately, the volume of the shipments through that corridor is not that high compared with its potential volume. In recent months, there have been multiple meetings held on both government level as well as between businesses. I actually met 10 delegations from the Russian Federation discussing Lotus Cluster, Ala Port, Makhachkala Port development. It's also worth of mention that we have a railway connection with Russia in Sirax, and also other spheres need to be developed. I want to reiterate that we have to overcome the, let's say, the negotiations stage and go towards the implementation stage. Our Russian colleagues mentioned that every morning they wake up with a new issue, with new sanctions getting imposed outside when external sanctions are imposed on the partnering countries. Thus, I would like to focus on the fact that we have to mitigate sanctions in terms of transportation and shipments. They have to move towards the implementation phase. We have to implement multiple projects between our two countries. And as it was emphasized, the development of infrastructure is extremely important in this respect. We have to develop the railway transportation infrastructure with Russia. Between Rashta and Astara, for instance. However, this will be made possible only in 3 years, and it will not get finalized, since those are the measures which are forecast long-term. However, there are other measures, other actions which could be taken for the short-term period, for the improvement of the situation related to shipments. We could look at the Caspian Sea area, especially related to sea shipments. The potential of both countries related to sea shipments is extremely high. At present, the number of vessels which run in the region is insufficient to cover the needs of our customers for the transportation of cargoes. At present, Islamic Republic of Iran requires at least 50 container vessels which could operate in the Caspian Sea. We also met multiple times with our colleagues in the Russian Federation, with representatives of Sberbank, related to the investment in that sphere. However, it was only at the theory level, so to say, at the level of meetings and discussions. So let me urge my colleagues in Russia, representatives of businesses and the public bodies, to the extreme potential, eventual potential of the Caspian Sea route. Hopefully, with our joint efforts and joint investments on both sides, mutually, we could develop the required infrastructure in the Caspian Sea to build the competitive logistic chains. Taking into consideration the already existing logistic routes in Russia, the Russian Federation has not paid attention to the infrastructure of the southern ports recently, in recent years, which were to be developed on a timely basis. The potential which we have in the Caspian Sea through the development of the southern ports of the Russian Federation and by provision of sufficient number of vessels for shipments, if we're able to perform this work, we will increase the output, the efficiency of ports of both countries. Second issue is development of infrastructure in Islamic Republic of Iran, namely building rolling stock, rebuilding existing railway tracks, construction of new tracks. Apart from that, construction of vessels, development of the sea infrastructure. And when we get back to the issue of the corridor, north-south, if both countries aim at reaching the required results for the corridor, both of us have to apply practical solutions to the construction of new vessels, the required number of vessels for the shipment of cargoes. Besides, Iranian colleagues who deal with cargo transit have to be assured that to cover their needs, they can count on the investment participation of both countries, both Iran and Russia. And they have to be absolutely sure that if they invest their own funds, they will get the payback effective in shorter period, and the corridor will be operating full scale. Many partners left Russia due to sanctions, but Iranian partners are prepared to tackle risks, to deal with the current geopolitical conditions, considering the availability of the required financing on both sides. Also, to reiterate again that the main factor for successful operation of North-South corridor is the thorough planning of the corridors, of the infrastructure, and the associated sectors of economy. If we're able to form joint ventures in terms of a shipping company or build a firm interaction cooperation for the corridor operation, This will allow us to achieve the goals of both countries. The negotiations of President Raisi and the President of Russia and the President of Republic of Belarus, Mr. Lukashenko. In course of those negotiations, the discussion was around inviting new countries to the implementation of this North-South corridor. We have a proposal that in order to form a free economic zone or area in the southern ports of Iran, where all mechanisms of such an area could be applied, namely a lack of import duties. It is one of the proposals of our country to facilitate the potential of the North-South corridor. Within the context, within the framework of cooperation of the Eurasian Economic Union, and in order to facilitate cargo shipment delivery to the customers. Within recent 2 weeks, we have the last series of meetings with the union representatives, and hopefully they will be eventually successful and be fruitful for further practical application. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I will have just one question to you, and will you just answer them shortly? Whether, in your opinion, Mr. Alireza Peyman Pak, whether it is logical to have the transportation logistic corridor north to south, India, Iran, Russia, St. Petersburg, whether it's a logical corridor. Well, even under current conditions, we are working on this issue together with our Indian partners. We and them, we started working towards signing the necessary contracts and documents to set up such an alliance to ensure that we provide for the needs of India and Russia. However, as you said, if it is like a joint alliance, yes, that's the right approach, and it will be very efficient, especially to increasing the containerization and increasing the number of 20-foot containers. Some clients use 40-foot containers, but others demand on 20-foot containers, and this is exactly the bottleneck that Iran faces even during transit of cargoes. And the alliance between Russia, India, and Iran will indeed help the challenge with containerization and the need for investments into the developed infrastructure. State bodies, both we and India, we are interested in reduced tariffs, reduced rates, and in preferences given to alliance participants. And I hope that today and today's meeting will be just the first introductory state towards having such an alliance, and we will move from signing the necessary papers to practical steps. Thank you. I also want to ask a question to esteemed Deputy Minister. You understand that transport is an unbroken chain of links between all participants in the transportation. We mentioned the possible route India, Iran, Russia. Then, in your speech, you suggested having a joint venture in logistics. How about setting such a logistic company with 4 participants: Russia, Azerbaijan, Iran, and India? And in this case, we cover the entire transportation route, and we'll have a seamless, single service. What do you think of that? Well, Sergei Alexeyevich, as you know, when it comes to land transportation, transportation by rail, we need to engage Azerbaijan. Of course, we know that we have projects, railway transportation projects, where presence and participation of Azerbaijan is a matter of life and death. So it's very much needed. But when it comes to maritime transportation, the alliance of 3 countries, India, Iran, and Russia, will be sufficient, and we will cover in this respect all needs. You may also know, coming back to railroad transportation, that Azerbaijan and us, we reached very good agreements when it comes to railroads. Unfortunately, in the past recent years, the use of this network for supply of goods, we faced delays in these supplies, customs challenges, so etc. However, at the last agreements with Azerbaijan, we moved really forward, and hopefully we'll no longer face such delays that were faced by us previously. And once our railroad projects are implemented, the alliance is needed. But in maritime transportation, just 3 countries are sufficient: India, Iran, and Russia. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Peymanpak. And I would like to give the floor to Sergei Removich Krasilnikov, Vice President and Managing Director for the International Two-Way Cooperation Division of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. Thank you very much, Andrei Nikolaevich. I will not give you any summary, and some people are leaving, but we are kind of wrapping up this plenary, though we had a very fruitful discussion, and indeed we went beyond the topic declared by the plenary. We discussed the technology and international challenges. TRANSTEC together is organized by the Russian Union of Industrials and Entrepreneurs, and we became the co-organizers of this event. So we want the feedback from you, whether we were able to bring together logistics companies and industrial companies. Later on, we can tie in agricultural companies, and it will be a powerful forum where logistic companies are joined in by industrial and agricultural companies, and then we'll have even branch meetings. I wanted to inform you that tomorrow at 9:15, with esteemed Iranian colleagues, our old friend Peyman Paka, since February. That's quite a term under current challenges. We will sign the memorandum of setting up the Business Cooperation Council between Russia and Iran, and we invite everyone to attend. It will be one of the, and probably a key platform to review the goals, bilateral goals, and solutions that can be found to achieving them. I wondered why I was called in for this plenary, why Andrei Nikolaevich brought me in. Probably to voice a certain idea that he could not say himself. And I would like to praise our moderator, who is more than the moderator. He is a driver for the project. And 2 years ago, he came to our Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs with this proposal. Not everybody immediately supported it, but he assembled the team, and the project was started on somewhat different ground. So mobility was taken from Siemens company, but they were not holding on to this word. So we had the German and French partners in different configurations. Due to various reasons, they are no longer with us. But our doors are open. We are not blocking our doors to anyone who wants to cooperate. So the infrastructure, railroads will stay. Like Roman's Road served people for hundreds of years. They stay forever. And we will have this corridor between north to south and west to east. We will build the needed infrastructure, and we will have quite a global network that is being widely discussed now, at least in Europe and the European Committee, where these notions were born. We have digital brothers, and we can be easily controlled. Well, digital twins are difficult to control, but railroads are easy to control because that's hard infrastructure. So, and even a small portion of plans that we discussed here is implemented within the sensible time frame. That is going to be an achievement. Of course, the questions abound, and we don't have enough answers for them. That's why we have this platform for debate, and the initiative is brought forth by the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. We want to set up new structures. It's not a point, it's a way, it's a process where all opinions will be heard. And I heard a key word during our plenary discussion, which is coordination. Everyone has business interests. So, however, we are a platform where everyone can be engaged in an honest talk with government structures, with experts that can be brought in. So, sometimes we lobby, sometimes we criticize or even giggle on some proposals. So this is the platform. It is announced, and our Iranian colleagues already joined us. So we have a good company. So, of course, it's not an easy region with many challenges, but we will find the mutually beneficial solutions with countries, nations that live near the Caspian Sea. Anyway, we have certain timelines. Therefore, we need to wrap up and find up with a good word. The Chinese colleagues found one road, one way. That's a good name that captures everything. And we need to find a beautiful name as well. TRANSTEC uses in its agenda, in its program, different words like mobility, etc. And we have an offer that was not yet approved. We can say the project of 3 oceans and 1 sea, the Arctic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the Caspian Sea. So 3 oceans and 1 sea, that's a possible name for the project. Come up with your ideas if you have something to offer. Thank you very much. Our community will review these proposals and give you some feedback. We have like 10 minutes left, and I would like to focus on 2 points and on a general issue that concerns everyone. My question is to the representative of Russian Railroads Logistics, the Deputy General Director, Sergei Borisovich Levin. You listened to old presentations, and you heard Mr. Severilov presentation along with Mr. Pavlov presentation, and just recently Sergei Krasilnikov spoke. So what do you think about the proposal by Mr. Severilov, whether FESCO will support setting up a committee on managing supply chain within the structure under the auspices of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs? What is your opinion? Dear colleagues, I would like to first thank previous speakers for very engaging presentations. So we support all these initiatives, and we will engage in this new. We'll get engaged in this new structure if the Russian Union of Industrial Entrepreneurs invites us into the committee, into the newly set committee. One more question to discuss. Our Iranian colleagues spoke about the north-south corridor. Sergei Alexeyevich in his presentation focused a lot on north-south corridor and also west-east corridor. And my question is to Mr. Severilov. And to Maxim Filimonov. You mentioned infrastructure. So, in your opinion, what Dela Company Group and FESCA Company Group, what you can do in order to develop the infrastructure? Here I mean to develop St. Petersburg and Northwest Russia, develop into the international distribution hub, or whether this role is to be shifted to Moscow, or together by a joint effort we can continue the previous efforts of your companies and set up a strong international transportation and logistic hub using Northwest region, and possibly using Russian railroads, its Oktyabrski branch, and you'll join in, or using other platforms. And in this case, we will have a real hub, distribution international center. Otherwise, we look enviously on what wonderful things they do in Rotterdam, Singapore, Shanghai. We want to play an important role in this coherent infrastructure chain. What's your opinion?
Please, you're welcome, Maxim. You come first, right? Please. Andrei, thank you for this question. I think that our conference turned to discussion of north-south corridor. From what I heard, it is not fully correct the way we perceive this direction from St. Petersburg to Bandar Abbas. The economy of Russia is not only in St. Petersburg and northwestern region, not only in Moscow, but in other regions as well. And speaking of some distribution center, we have to think about distribution centers spread around the country. We met with Mr. President of Republic of Tatarstan, Mr. Minikhanov. It is in Tatarstan that we are creating such a hub for Povolzhye, for the Volga region and the adjacent areas, for the north-south corridor as well. It will be very important, since we will process not only the railway cargoes, but also the cargoes transported by rivers. We are calculating and reviewing the transportation by Volga through Povolzhye, Volga region, to Caspian Sea, then linking this to north-south route as well. As Deputy Minister said, we lack both vessels, River Sea class. I know that there are insufficient vessels in the Caspian Sea to transport the proposed amount of cargoes. There are insufficient facilities and infrastructure on the river level and the sea level as well. And I would like not only to purely focus on building the route, but rather the need of accumulating the cargoes from northwestern area of the country, from Povolzhye, from Ural, and consolidate those cargoes in the southern ports. So your proposal is to develop the network interaction and infrastructure of transit and logistics to link together the national domestic markets and international markets. Maxim, now, what is your view of this issue in terms of transportation and logistics complexes worldwide? Whether St. Petersburg could be at the world-class level, as well as the northwestern part of the country. Our group of companies, Diela, is one of the key players represented in the sea regions, the Baltics, Black Sea, Caspian Sea, and the Far East. And the northwestern region has always been a very powerful center of our business. We have several container terminals in Ust-Luga, for instance, Petroles port, first container port, and we have always shipped our joint cargoes through northwest of the country. So certainly the window which was made by Tsar Peter I to be still open without any webs covering it. And we hope that the Northwest will resume its role of the export and import hub. When it comes to its development in current conditions, certainly one main thing you have to consider for its development is working on its sea connections, its sea routes, the markets where we want to approach. It is difficult to compete with Rotterdam because it is in the very center of Europe, in the very center of such a market. And northwest of our country is focused on the customers in Russia, around 150 million people, and the adjacent countries included. Perhaps another, well, maybe 200 million, around that number. So mostly we will be focused, I guess, on the northwest, on that Eurasian territory and processing of their needs. But even that development probably will not be that effective without the sea leverage tool. And you have to be very creative in terms of resolution of those issues. Secondly, you have to develop the infrastructure. We have been working tight with October Railways. It is our main railway partner. You cannot develop the logistic activity without them. Major portion of foreign cargoes were transported by motorways from the northwest and not by railways. Moscow and St. Petersburg, in this section, the main focus has always been on the passenger transportation. And thus we have to think how to unload both hubs. Thank you so much. To finalize our discussion, let me ask one question to all speakers, namely, and let me request so that you respond in just a couple of words. What would you suggest to the managers in terms of developing mobility of the supply chains? Let's start from your side. Maxim, let's start from you. Once again, what would you suggest to managers in terms of mobility development for the supply chains? As I said before, I would wish all our managers to be more ambitious, since being ambitious is associated with new routes development and also associated with new digital technology, new innovative solutions for logistics. Thank you. Payman Park, Mr. Payman Park. I would wish the management in current logistic conditions to develop and to abide by a very specific and very firm roadmap to provide for the needs, logistic needs of their partners. Thank you. Sergey, please. It's a good question. The world is changing rapidly. Many said today that every day it's something new. We have to be more courageous. We have to be fast, working fast. Sergey, I thought of saying the same, more courageous and fast, work faster. It turned out that my son is the logistics manager, and I would wish him to marry as soon as possible. That's a good wish. And to finalize, Andrei, your wish, probably just using a couple of words. Look for new paths. This would and containerize. This is the main wish. Thank you all participants for your attendance. My wishes to your personal success and achievements in all your endeavors. The discussion which started today will continue during the forum, and hopefully this discussion will bring fruitful results to our companies for the effective business operation. Thank you, everyone, once again.
У нас время закончилось.
Коллеги, прошу всех занимать свои места. Буквально через минуту.
I invite everyone to be seated because in 1 minute we are starting the second part of our plenary session about the logistics mobility and international transportation corridors.
Уважаемые коллеги, рад приветствовать вас на
Dear colleagues, I'm happy to welcome you at the plenary session, Innovation Technologies and in the Logistics of International Transportation Corridors, ITC. This is a tough topic to discuss because the term international was reinterpreted these days. And logistically, our previous partners with whom we actively engaged, now Russian exporting and importing companies are no longer available. So these are unheard calls to the Russian logistics system. In general, we may say that even now, the most apocalyptic forecasts of spring this year. You might remember the exchange rate between dollar and ruble, 120 rubles per dollar. But it's no longer there at this mark. So the first surge of this storm, the first round of this storm was sustained by the Russian Federation and its economy. And it was sustained, thankfully, not in the least part, through the logistics offered by Russian transportation and infrastructure companies. So these companies were quite apt to the challenges. Of course, the stability of the logistics system is not quite to the required and expected level expected by some market participants. So we see some overload in container terminals in Russia's Far East. We also know about challenges at BAM Railroad and TRANSTEC Road when it comes to throughput. However, we declare that the transformation of Russian logistics with reorientation from reorientation of the export and import towards Asia and Middle East countries indeed happened. And a determinative role was played when it comes to the speed and efficiency. It was played by the good coordination between all players in this process. I mean, the transshipping companies and transportation companies. The key challenge was towards the railway companies, though truck carriers also had some turmoil moments. However, the main hopes are with railroad companies. And Russian companies, in fact, put into practice this declaration that I brought up many times, that Russian railroads, when it comes to its competitive edge with European railroad companies in terms of client-centeredness, they are way ahead of their European colleagues. And they can offer a range of interesting solutions, both in management, in IT, in logistics. And in a larger scheme, we may say that the cooperation is efficient, and therefore Russian logistics feels quite sustainable and stable in facing the current competition. So we have a beautiful panel in front of you. Let me introduce my colleagues who are here to speak and to review the innovation technology field applied to international transportation under not easy consequence situation. So Artamantsev, Ms. Sergei Vladimirovich, then we have the head of railway roads and Levin Sergei. Tsvetkov, who is Mr. Tsvetkov, who is the head of Northern Star, Severная Zvezda company. And I would like to give the floor to Evgeny Georgovich, and he will cover the challenges faced by Russian railroads, and we will focus on other challenges, because Russian railroads is a key customer for innovation and for locomotives, for automation and telemechanics. And of course, here, when it comes to innovation and budget for innovation and investments, Russian railroads, they manage to keep the investment level both this year and next year, and support the trend for import substitution by placing more serial production orders for domestic equipment with domestic manufacturers. Hello, everyone. I welcome you to this forum. Our moderator said that our expectations are lower than in previous years. No, I wouldn't subscribe to that. The themes discussed, especially at the first part of this plenary session, in fact showed the importance, not only for the Russian Federation, but for other countries that are traditional partners for us when it comes to logistics. So the topic is very important. I would like to thank the organizers for this unique opportunity to speak to you and to present the largest railroad in the package of a Russian railroads company. Here, I mean, it's Oktyabrski branch. When it comes to unloading values, we are leaders, and our proximate departments, like North Caucasus, they are way behind us. Traditionally, we are number 3 after West Siberia Railroad and Sverdlovskaya Railroad. When it comes to the length of railroad tracks, it's over 9,000 kilometers, and number of staff employed at Oktyabrski railroads, we are again the biggest. We have 690 stations, and almost 500 are open for transport for cargoes. And you see, we unite several seas, like the White Sea to the Caspian Sea, and we provide the support, such provide services to Usluga, Kandalaksha ports, among others. And even Murmansk port gets our railway support. We have 4 cross-borders railroads with Finland, with Latvia, one, and with Belarus, one, and 2 with Estonia. And traditionally, we show loading dynamic, which is positive, even in the previous year, that during the COVID pandemic. And regardless of geopolitics happening around Russia, year 2022 will finish with shipping off at level of 2021, not below. Why we achieve this, you may wonder. How can we get to these high figures in terms of loads? Because of these categories, fertilizers, raw materials, and metals. The total cargo turnover in 2022 will stay at the previous year level. Oktyabrskaya Railroad, for the last 3 years, got engaged into projects for logistics. And thanks to that, in the north to south, west to east corridors, we have offer several logistics solutions. In total, over 30 projects. Each portfolio has a name and a short name, an acronym. And most of our customers understand these acronyms. As you see, a number of destinations are on the slide. Briefly, the delivery terms are also given, as well as the total length of every corridor. Just several examples. In west-east corridor, everyone knows how to operate using the Transsib and BAM railroads, and then through Far East ports or land cross borders. So that's a known corridor. So we, on our part, through west to east corridor, we rolled through the logistics with 2 cross borders at Kazakhstan and Altenbek. And last year, in August, we, together with RZD Logistics Company, we rolled for the first time from north to south corridor with a Finnish cargo from Finland. We got it at Ust-Luga port, and then through Russia, Azerbaijan, and Iran, we brought it to Andarabaz port, and then through railroads by sea to the Indian, to Novashela. That was the first swallow, so to say. And nothing at the time manifested any events that could happen in February this year. So we had this first experience and the portfolio, and we used it quickly to shift our operations under new circumstances, realities, and challenges faced by our country, by our cargo owners, shippers, companies. And we can offer the new transportation products to them. So, looking at new products, north to south corridor, through its west branch, through Novorossiysk and Istanbul ports, together with a Sigeja Group company. The first products, these were paper products, we brought it through Novorossiysk port to Istanbul. As you see, delivery terms are on the slide, and it was faster than the traditional maritime route through the Suez Canal. And the rates, when it comes to tariffs, well, they were quite comparable. So the volume for the project is not huge, 65,000 ton, a little more than that, 65,000 tons, but it is a working corridor. The Northern Sea route, well discussed. When it comes to coal, through Murmansk ports to Far Eastern ports, we deliver by debugged technologies. It's well known. 45 days ago, the first swallow from port of St. Petersburg, 8 containers with paper products were shipped via the Northern Sea routes, and with our potential customers, the FESCA Group, we implemented this project. So that was a pilot. Then we will continue operating it, and potential volume up to 100 TEU monthly. This is the outlook for this corridor, and we plan to increase to that value, to increase the volume to that value. Belarusian fertilizers transportation. Traditionally, we had our terminal at Klaipėda port, and our friends from Belarus offered a more convenient way of transporting minerals, and quicker and cheaper by 30%. So through Ust-Luga port, we decreased the rate burden on our friends, and we used the maritime route. The volume of Belarus products, 777 tons through Ultrabank terminal at Ust-Luga and dry port at Predportovaya was used for from mineral carriers to containers for reloading, and then by containers through Trans-Siberian port with the destination of Shanghai.
Kostomuksha, the ones who are not aware of that, it's one of the biggest mines for mining of ferrous concentrate. 2 routes ran once a day through ports of Finland, and 2 routes ran for their own consumption in Cherepavets. It's clear that after sanctions got imposed, some issues were associated with the excessive amount of ferrous core for the Russian Federation, and that excess from export got sold through Ust-Luga port, through Ultramar company, then by maritime routes to Istanbul for further distribution not only in Turkey but for the other countries. I brought several projects as example. As to the digital transformation at October Railways, we have around 92% of documents filled in automatically, and although geography and logistics is changing, they're changing. We are working on the process, we are adjusting it, tuning it, and we will improve it. We have created quite long ago a customer page, and also a mobile app is being developed too, and thus you can fill in the order, then you can track the shipment, you can look at the documentation for that cargo, number of containers and rail cars. You can forecast other shipments and build a clear setup of unloading of this or that cargo. looking at the available space at the storage. It is clear that among various types of transportation, railways is the most environmental now. And so that you understand the numbers to which extent we're more environment focused than other transportation companies, is that you can use a calculator, environmental calculator, which has been implemented. When you fill in a document for shipment, you can calculate the remaining carbon footprint of the new cargoes during 10 months of 2022, the reduction of the carbon footprint, the reduction of the impact of CO2 on global environment was effectively at the level of 0.5 million tons. To finalize my speech, I have a final slide here. Let me express my gratitude to our partners and colleagues present in this room for enabling us to implement the most ambitious ideas in the sphere of logistics. I've always been sure of, and will continue thinking the same path, that the more we resolve issues in a prompt way, the more positive fruit we achieve. The more interesting this work becomes. Quite often, logistic issues are not compliant with the logical way of thinking. And in the corridor of north-south, which was mentioned multiple times during the previous session, when our colleagues mentioned the importance of the northwest region of the country, we are able to use the competences, and we have the ability to implement the competences which we have gained in recent years, together with our colleagues. Thank you very much, Victor. And colleagues, please start thinking about the questions. You can raise your hands. Let me ask such a question. There are many innovative services which are online, available. Which are the key complications that you are facing in starting such innovative services? Thank you for your question. The difficulty is when you tune a new logistics corridor. Usually it's the main difficulty, namely the seamless technology available. We have to build such transportation products which our partner would not fill, would not run around looking for solutions among the different transportation companies, looking at different ways of transporting their cargoes. We must be able to create such a transportation product which would enable a customer not to focus on smaller specifics, since it's the logistics companies who have to deal with it, but rather to focus on their own targets. A second issue which we have to resolve, and I will be raising this idea tomorrow, the throughput tariff rate issue in the north-south corridor from Russia to India. We have calculated the tariff, that rate. We looked at the pricing of a 40-feet container per 1 kilometer of a railway or maritime route, and where the tariff is exceeding in some infrastructure, we have to work closely on the corridors which are shorter, short span corridors, which are less costly than the alternative ones, so that we agree together and unfold the throughput and that potential. Another question, actually in the beginning of the session I mentioned that 2022 we were able to cope with the first stage of the storm. And it seems to us now that 2023 it will be even harder. But in 2022, some routes were still available, and they will no longer be in year 23. So it sounds pleasant now that the October railways present positive dynamics. What is your view of 2023 in terms of cargoes? Which types of cargoes their transportation will grow? And which other logistic solutions would you propose? In the October railways, we are very optimistic as to 2023, and we consider the complication of transportation of bulk cargoes, which we transport by railways. For 3 years, in course of a project, we have been dealing with our shipping companies and customers in terms of switching to container transportation, open-top type of containers. Severstal from the city of Cherepavets, they used to bring in half-railway cars. We were able to find a unique solution, namely shipment of products from Severstal to the quay in ports in the open-top type containers. You don't need to unload the cargo. You transport the cargo directly for loading by the port cranes, and the container is then taken from the cart and places it in the vessel, in the open vessel, and turns it there. Thus, the railway car gets emptied faster, and the infrastructure gets used to a more extensive level. This reduces the loading and unloading operations. And with some customers, they simply lack storage facilities for storage or short-term keeping of the cargoes. Having tried such a technology, everyone will win. We understood that everyone will win. In north-south corridor, the railway track of 1443 at Iranian railways, we will be facing a certain barrier, a certain issue in terms of bulky cargoes compared with container shipments, where there are 2-3 minutes reloading of a container. It's really pleasant to hear that it's an innovative technology, that Russia has such developers of such open-top containers. Since in the beginning, it was only the Chinese containers that our railways started transporting them in our country. Now, let me give the floor to Mr. Levin, and he's representing RZD Logistica division. we started talking about the North-South corridor. Which are the successes, which are the bottlenecks, which are the challenges, and which are the promising areas, since it's obvious that the demand will grow at an unprecedented level. Dear colleagues, once again, thank you all organizers for participating in such an interesting discussion. Indeed, at various fora and in different discussions, we talk about the North-South corridor. It was mentioned for the first time in the year 2000. For 22 years, that corridor was on paper. There were attempts by RZD Logistics, effective 2019, has started transporting smaller cargoes using the western track of that corridor. The geopolitical situation this year played a crucial role. It's not only ourselves, I guess all other logistic companies and railway administrations have switched to that corridor as a tool for shipment of cargoes both ways. Indeed, the corridor sounded, the beginning of that corridor sounded that it started from St. Petersburg. But now, considering the current situation in the global arena, we ourselves see the beginning of that corridor starting from the areas even beyond the Ural Mountains. That corridor starts there. Everything that runs from Russia through the adjacent countries, say Iran, or by sea somewhere, like going to Africa, it all runs along that North-South corridor. The topic of the panel discussion is innovative technology, but you have to think about technology always, because shipment is technology in the first place. That corridor started to be used practically recently. We're not thinking now about the technology, not about innovations as such, but the ways of transporting, of shipping cargoes. RZD Logistica objective is switched towards that sphere. There were several branches mentioned by Viktor about Caspian, Eastern branch, Novorossiysk, Turkey line. So it's actually a wide corridor. And since our roots lay with railways, we thought of focusing on the onshore routes, the western route via Azerbaijan, and eastern Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Iran running towards Turkmenaban, then by sea. That corridor is complicated, but everything what we start is always complicated, by all means. Our colleagues from Iran mentioned that they're able to have 12 million tons to run through that corridor. But there is no seamless technology available for that corridor yet. It also implies borders of several countries. That creates issues for shipment of cargoes. In the current situation, customs who travel along that corridor pay more attention to the disadvantages. And certainly, this corridor, it competes with the maritime transportation by vessels. We do understand that in terms of time will play the crucial role. And railways will win compared with other transportation ways. And through that, we will be able to attract a larger amount of cargoes to that corridor. October this year, we started shipping by that corridor. So far, those cargoes run through the eastern line. It is connected directly from Russia to Kandar-Bas. And you should not forget about other lines, other branches of that track. Ourselves, in logistics, we focus on infrastructure. Whichever the amount you want to bring, the more you want to bring, you cannot only focus on the throughput of the railways. The regional administrations have to work on forming the comfortable conditions for cargo shipment. There is a joint tariff rate defined along the whole corridor, but the tariff component is not the only thing. You have to focus on the whole cost of transportation. It's the cost of a container, of the cost of that railway section shipment. Thus, there are many factors which impact the cost of shipment. This is why, together with the participating countries, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Iran, we are discussing not only the joint tariffs, but forming an ecosystem of corridors, so to say, which would enable us, the logistic companies, not only in Russia, but in Kazakhstan, use the same directions. Some cargoes are shipped from India through Kazakhstan, then they run to Russia. Let me mention that certainly that corridor will be of significant importance, not only an economic importance, but also political importance. All our efforts and our turnover in our trade between our countries, it is growing between our countries. Certainly that corridor has some limitations. There are some bottlenecks in Iranian railways. They do have them. Considering the former Soviet Union railways, Kazakhstan, Russia, Armenia, we are obviously ahead compared with our Iranian colleagues. They have to learn a lot from us. As to the western track, that line from Astara to Resht, it certainly impacts the geography of shipments, because everyone prefers the eastern line right now. But the construction, when it is effected, when Iran builds that railway, there is a shorter distance, of course. The major amount of cargoes will be switched to the western line. That's all I thought of saying.
Wrapping up, let me say that the ruble to dollar exchange rate was mentioned on multiple occasions. 140 rubles per dollar is no good, as well as 40 rubles per dollar. It's not a good commercial story. Russian exporters depend a lot on the exchange rate. The stronger our ruble is, the smaller is our export opportunity. Therefore, we have all these bottlenecks, and we must keep them in balance. I mean, exchange rate is one element, corridors. So keeping them in balance, make sure that everyone wins in this situation. Thank you. Sergei Borisovich, just one more question to you. indeed, you have an innovative product, because we see that different product groups have different logistic maturity. And a promising group, much promising, especially under sanctions, are foodstuffs. And no sanctions are introduced for foodstuffs, by the way. So, and you achieved a lot by developing this express innovative solution. Give us more details on that, because we know there is the Eurasian Express. So, what do you mean? Whether it's more business related or more policy and politics related? So, give us a fuller picture. Thank you very much for your question. Indeed, the anything like express product has two sides of one coin. Aero Express at Eurasia, this is like a mostly geopolitical tool for the territory of post-Soviet republics, setting up different hubs which will consolidate the territory and achieving good storage standards like good temperature. And we mean by Aero Express, these are an improved railway train with stable storage condition at low temperatures, for example. And these expresses will run from one hub to the other. We have negotiations and meetings at all levels between different countries. So far, we're at the so-called paper stage. The other side of this coin, our expresses afford faster transportation of, let's say, foodstuffs in good storage conditions. We, as a logistic company, we purchased 500 refrigerating containers, and they are autonomous. That's their specification, allowing to keep good conditions. And this technology was always present on trucks, on railroads, on huge sea ships, and these giants provided container loads of delicate products, foodstuffs for different destinations. But what we have diesel generators installed into containers, into these refrigerator containers. It's an innovative technology, not only for us, but for the entire world. First containers of that type, the first generation, so to say, was invented between 2010 and 2020. In 2010s, to transport equipment like computers. Hewlett-Packard delivered in these containers computers from China. The containers were no good for foodstuffs because of big temperature fluctuations, and someone had a clever idea to improve this container, and in 2019 the first generating container for foodstuffs was produced, and we have two companies in Russia which manufacture such containers. Aero Express now runs between only Russia and China. Why so, you may wonder? Because there are not many generation points along the railroads, and everything brought to China first was transported to ports, and aboard the ship it was plugged into the ship's power network, power system. So now with these diesel-generated containers, we can deliver products between Far East and Moscow over 10, 11 days it takes the route. Did I answer your question? Indeed. Our session discusses innovative solutions and products. what are your plans? You now have 500 standalone containers with diesel generators. So do you plan to increase this fleet? Indeed, this is not sufficient number. Our Aero-Express project and investments into the project were planned prior to the pandemic, when we globally don't know anything about the pandemic and borders were open. Unfortunately, China is still in the pandemic zone. Therefore, our express goes to towards Russia by land, and our Chinese colleagues do not allow us in by land, so we bring to our products to ports, and then products are delivered to China by sea. So we hope after pandemic we will increase our capacity manifold. Thank you very much, and I will give the floor to Mr. Atamantsev, who is the head of the St. Petersburg branch of Transportation System Company. So after his presentation, you will have the knowledge that they also have refrigerator logistic projects. Mikhail Borisovich, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me for this plenary session. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. So we discuss technological innovations. Previous speakers already mentioned the turbulence of the current year faced by our country and by our business community. So therefore, major efforts were invested this year to address these challenges. But at the same time, we look into the future. So how can I switch between my slides? By voice? Not yet. By a pointer. So let us assess the outcomes of the previous decade. The national logistic community and logistic system during the previous decade was rather the object for management rather than the king. So we were implemented. We were abided by the rules of the international logistic codes and norms. And we rolled out projects in the regions that were previously piloted in other regions. For example, we used Yamal experience in using containers for maritime transportation to the processing platforms, and then this experience was used in land transportation. This current year brings more challenges to our community, whether we need to support the direction and trends of the 1980s of the previous century, having this electronic document flow now globally available, or whether we shall, similarly to other areas, come up with our own analog of, let's say, SWIFT-like technologies. So this is not because our country is unique in terms of logistics. We must address security issues of our country and maximal throughput for cargo flows. There are various trade events and trade events, and we have to assess our markets and whether we can come with some unique tools. The total market capacity is 147 million people. And this country has a unique location. Plus, we are a lengthy country with borders on oceans and seas. Therefore, we have all the prerequisites for constructing a unique transportation system with some advantages for the Eurasian Economic Community. So, and if we tune up correctly the international transportation corridors, then our specification will allow to enjoy our competitive edge. So, I would not undervalue the future role of the national logistics system. Therefore, when we sign international contracts and agreement, we shall to build up standards for transportation corridors operations and bear in mind the leading role of Russian participation and Russian logistic elements. Just support this leader's role, I would say. So the shipper as the integrator of logistic solutions. We discuss North and South currently a lot, and we understand this is a vital alternative, potentially dozens of millions of tons of the cargo flow. But at the same time, we look at the corridor east to west, and we see that the east-west corridor has a far superior service level, but dozens of years were spent to develop this standard. Therefore, we must appoint the integrator, ALTK, and to have this chain, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Russia provide certain authorities for tariffs. Once the transportation volumes are hit, and then we see, once all of it were done, we saw a several-fold growth. And achieving the cargo volume was, I think, 1.1 million. So at every trade event and conference, we keep saying that the law on forwarder activities must have a clear definition of the forwarder's role. So currently we have a cargo transportation company, cargo owner, cargo recipient, but quite often we face situations that the role of forwarder is not described. And I will answer Sergei's question. What new customer demands we have? Well, customer is really willing to charge someone with all these challenges when it comes to building new logistic products. Once everything is up and running, then major manufacturers, once again, would hire former professionals from the forwarders category, because then transportation corridors are well known. But currently, when we are just pioneering the routes and navigating new products, the role of forwarder is becoming larger, and there are no legal foundation, because we just have the contractual obligations, and we cannot, with this, approach railroads and get the same conditions as the owners do, as we enjoy certain rates as cargo senders, but not as forwarders. And these challenges, in fact, are known. there are different limits for railway operators, ports, terminals. These are frameworks, and they have planned their business plan based on their obligations. But this is a closed loop. There is no exchange, and data is provided only on a mutual basis. There is no general standard that covers everything. So we still need the national integrator role. When it comes to paper flow, it's nice to have your client account and submit an application. That's fine. But when it comes to the business core, we need the production electronic document flow and links to e-government, e-customs, e-electronic company for transportation, etc.
There must be some innovative links to keep the electronic forms of documents for their proper processing for further checks and inspections. When it comes to, and let me switch away from the slide, in terms of innovative technology, although everyone says that there are many challenges, we have just such a feeling that we responded promptly and have reswitched, or the real hardships are underway. In 9-10 months statistics, we are on the track of 2021 in terms of the whole railway, whole cargo transportation by various types of transport. But looking at the transportation technology through 2030, speaking of digitalization section, there are limited resources. 7.5 billion tons of cargoes per year are transported, are shipped in the Russian Federation. 5.5 billion tons by motorways. Currently, logistics is changing, and it is the most promptly switching type of way of transportation. 1.1 billion tons by pipelines, 500, over 500 and 400 gas, 500 million is oil. If the pipeline is closed, then dozens of tons are being, 1,000 tons are being switched to new corridors, and a port for 40 million tons from the design to commissioning. The process will not take more than 5-7 years to start such a port. Since we are railway people, 1.3 billion tons transported by railways, that whole sphere needs to be developed. And there needs to be that link with the digitalization and IT. There must be a way of operating in the new technology schemes in the new transportation corridors. We have a lot that was achieved, and it takes long to lay new tracks, to arrange new terminals, to build new roads to those ports. But having the already existent network provides for new solutions. Trans-Siberian Railway over through BAM and focusing on eastern lines, we were forecasting 220 million tons for next year. And altogether railway cargo for this year is 1.3 billion. So such an increase of 200 million, all of that amount can run through that corridor. For you to understand the numbers, it's only 67 million tons of cargoes which properly fall in the available capacity. You use the container transportation, that's the easiest way The planning is implemented by pairs of trains running through the bottleneck lines. Vitaly could probably correct me if I'm wrong. There are several dozens of trains running during the day. And there is also such an objective by the economists in the Ministry of Transportation which proper directions to undertake as to mobility of supply chains. That's the most, as to the most mobile type of transportation is motorways. And the government has to look into opening of the new vehicle border crossing points. In Верхний Lars, for instance, that point operates with vehicles. In that transportation strategy, development of digitalization, the use of motorways, and development of motorways is something we have to pay attention to. In the pandemic period, during certain periods of time, there were issues with qualified personnel, with qualified drivers to drive those vehicles along the motorways. It may sound, as young people usually say, that I started talking only about motorways, but if we get back to railways, when you plan the transportation corridors on international scale, you have to assess the volume of cargoes to get transported, and then switching to signing of specific agreements with the parties involved. I looked at the numbers through 2030, 35. The exports are expected to grow, mostly involving containers. And thus we have to link them into specific schemes within that north-south corridor. We have to look at the ways to balance, either using the maritime ways or switching to maritime ports of China or elsewhere. As to the main part of the presentation, that should be all. Thank you so much. Ivan, when you mentioned the refrigerators, you have some innovative solutions. This is not a common situation when an operator is not only a customer but also an owner of some intellectual property in terms of technology solutions implemented. Perhaps a few words about the status, about the refrigerator shipments which are developing. In RZD Logistica, they focus on containers, but you have also solutions for effective provision of refrigerator containers. In this respect, for that side of logistics, how do you respond to the requests of the customers? Indeed, we paid attention to that market and we set a target to work not only based on the analysis of the available products, I mean the hardware or the innovations, but setting up the proper technology of processing the refrigerated goods. And none of the solutions which were available in the market last year do not allow you to process such refrigerated goods on refrigerated containers for proper processing of of freezing capacities, providing and allowing you to categorize and classify the different goods, to defreeze and then freeze some goods, to bring some goods unfrozen to the stores. And thus we focused on developing a technology. About 3-4 years we started that, working with a specific number of contractors. We set a joint target to our design group and our engineering community. After that, there was a combination of different elements which came together, which are available in the market, involving the IT, provision of IT solutions, the continued power supply for the refrigerator transportation. Well, if you look at the details, there was a unified IT platform of Tikhvin plant of loading 25 tons per axis in the rail car, for the rail container. It's either 4 of 20 tons or 2 by 40 tons. So, as to the diesel generator units, it's a joint project with Rostech and Kamo Energetika. It's namely a module with 2 diesel generators providing uninterrupted power supply with high reliability during 40 days. And thus, basically, any railway route will run for 40 days. That's enough to provide the required reliability. And you can set the refrigerator containers, both passive containers and with automated power supply. They try to save their power charge for each container. This allows them to provide higher mobility of those containers. In October, November, we will receive the 4th set of refrigerated containers, every containing 24 platforms. And this is such a product which will operate at a specific schedule from Novosibirsk through to Ussurisk, from St. Petersburg to Ussurisk, and Moscow, Ussurisk, along that track. And thus, we sell the electrified, the powered, refrigerated space. This is an interesting story indeed. Refrigerated containers, when the rolling stock is getting renewed with the new fitting platforms, over there the situation is a bit different. Some refrigerator containers, some of them have been written off, they are outdated. And we do require new products. And Sergei, a comment from your side? Just to add to what Ivan mentioned about the whole cold chain, so to say, it should be linked along the whole track. Let's say from the trawler getting the fish on the vessel and towards the store where that fish is supposed to be sold. So it should be a whole chain of freezing and defreezing in the store. And that's the whole cold chain, as we call it. The new legislation is supposed to be implemented so that the customers of those products will be able to buy those products at a high quality level. Now, Ivan mentioned creating the OTLK on a specific route. Indeed, there are some discussions about the eastern line as well as on the western line of that route. The more OTLK you have, the more claims there are on discriminated access to such a route. What should run first? The availability of seamless technology or undiscriminative access at a given section of the corridor? Well, first of all, when naming the operator, first of all, it should be an elected position, I think. There should be a competition for a specific period of time. There should be nominated operators. There should be several of them. For them, there should be single conditions, like for the U2LC, let's say 400,000 TEUs, so that no one gets an obstacle for applying for that section of the track, of the line. All operators have to bring the high-quality level service. So every operator had to switch to U2LC. And that work has to continue. We do see such operators present on the sections of the railways.
Or, well, there are some trans-container operators near Lake Baikal, but we want to have a seamless transportation via UTLC. Transit in year 21 from near Baikal, it's over 465 TEU, but from Kazakhstan, it's, let me repeat, over 1 million. Sergei, and what's your take on that? It has both sides to the story. Ivan and my colleagues in the logistics community always wanted and still want to use these routes for growing, for our corporate growing, but there are some barriers. However, if there are no barriers, then everyone runs in, so it is unrealistic. However, the route is complicated, it's complex, and I would go with the first option, having a single operator who will build the technology and then innovate on it, and then it can be used by others. Indeed, this is a complex issue. Let us compare it to mass goods products. So some would say that sugar at low price, it's again a highly innovative project that can achieve lots of objectives. So let us therefore consider this idea that some services are still competing in terms of deadlines and price. So if you do not compete in price, then no one will even consider your delivery terms. So under the present circumstances, yes, probably an idea to have a consolidated player will be, let's say, an inevitable evil. This will somewhat limit the competition and limit the capacity of major players, because we are not talking about a pool of small players. Well, we have, in fact, a pool of big players. Therefore, under the current circumstances, let us remember that Russian economy is in its mobilization state, and therefore it's inevitable that the state plays a bigger role and the consolidation is happening. So we are gradually wrapping up our session. I would like to give the floor to Ivan Zverkov, who is the operation director for Zvezda plant, and they implement a very complicated, complex project on Sverdlovsky deposit. So my question sounds easy at first glance. The situation has changed radically over the recent years, so there are two parts to my question. First, you implement this investment project, and any investment project requires cargoes to be delivered on site and something to be built and used. So you have this outbound logistics and the challenges. And the second part of this story, your logistics is directed towards the Northern Sea route, which has a paramount importance in today's economy. So, but how are you planning to resolve challenges related to your export logistics? Thank you. Good afternoon, forum participants. Thank you for your question, Mikhail Borisovich. Just in a nutshell about my company and our project. The logistic volumes and shipping out volumes are needed to implement the project. All in all, the volume of our deposit is above 5 billion tons, and these are coking coal and other coals under the licensing. The production volumes we expect to reach 10 million tons of coal in 26 and 26 million tons by year 30. Of course, such targets require highly capable transportation structure, internal and external. Internal part of our infrastructure. The deposit is 60 kilometers away from the Kara Sea, and therefore we are finalizing the construction of automobile road. We will commission next year the maritime onshore coal terminal, and we also, once the dredging the deep channel is made, so we can reach the capacity of 10 million tons. Of course, we arranged for general cargo delivery through maritime ports in Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. In this year, the transshipment volume was about 80,000 tons. Next year, 140,000 tons. And year to year, as the infrastructure builds up and additional facilities and operations of the deposit, so it will increase the cargo inflow. An important role is played by the freight cost. We also need icebreaker piloting. Therefore, every ton of our cargo becomes more expensive now and in the future. The self-cost structure in our coal, in the first 100 tons of our coal, per ton, 2/3 is the cost of freight. That's a very significant business load, and it impedes our competition with other coal suppliers. However, the current challenges, the sanctions, of course, an important role is played by sanctions on equipment, because we purchased certain foreign-make equipment, and it is logistically difficult to deliver the purchased already equipment to our location. Therefore, we need to re-gear and cooperate with other suppliers of similar equipment. So, because that's a distant location, every simple thing becomes innovative, I would say. General cargo's supply of materials, diesel generation requires massive amount of fuel, and if we have this coal nearby and use diesel, this is inefficient. Therefore, we plan to have a coal power plant, and this will reduce the cost of our coal. Another logistic element is the delivery of staff. Currently, about 1,000 people are employed at the deposit site. Next year, we plan staff increase by almost 100%, almost 2,000 by at the end of year 2023. We must deliver our workers. However, Dixon Airport does not receive, cannot land big aircrafts. The cost of a human worker is quite high at the deposit. If you consider all the expenses by our company to deliver by air our staff and with the salaries we pay on spot, of course, we find solutions to all these challenges, and I hope that we are successful in doing so. A key to success, I think, is manufacturing large tonnage tankers of Arctic grade. So we don't have enough capacity to deliver, to send off our coal in huge volumes. So it's a bottleneck and a major challenge how to deliver the project further. So we must ensure we have transportation means to ship off our products. Thank you. Colleagues, let us remember that innovations are propelled forward by cargo owner requests. And here the innovative request is to make sure that this logistic route is sustainable under the current circumstances. And let me invite Olga Fedotkina, an expert from the audience. Olga, you'll get the microphone. So you are wrapping up our session, and my question is related to e-document flow, e-paperwork. Olga is an expert of the Digital Transport and Logistics Association. The floor is yours. Colleagues, one of the key tools to ensure seamless logistics is e-paper flow. Colleagues spoke a lot about truck transportation. This is just a history of this country. So, and it doesn't require major infrastructure. You just need a road of any sort, a truck, and a driver. So it doesn't require additional investments, setting corridors, and onshore infrastructure at ports. So this is different. So September 1st this year, Russia finalized a breakthrough, in my opinion, in our association opinion, when we implemented digital technologies unparalleled in the world. We have the transportation e-document system, which holds all data in cloud, and then interdepartmental channels transmit the data to control bodies. That was important for the business because that was the business demand to have such a system, and the demand was met. The government, in fact, heard the business need. And our business understands where they can save costs and how they can swiftly work. And the system already documented several important documents, like transportation waybill. Starting next year, 3 more transportation documents are included, like the delivery contract. The system will be scaled up and has good outlooks. Electronic paperwork will be implemented across all transportation modalities. The railroad system has its own. The FESCA Group company has their own system successfully used in their transportations. Therefore, it's very important to bring together the different frameworks, our internal and external, to ensure the seamless e-document flow. And therefore, we must have a unified standard of transferring legally important documents, because the data is of legal importance here, of legal value. Thank you. Colleagues, indeed, logistics when it comes to data exchange cannot be efficient outside of the boundaries set up by the state. And therefore, it's such a pleasure to see that digitalization stirred an interest of our government, and Russia became in the 10 top countries when it comes to the maturity of digital government management. And there is an opinion that if not due to geopolitics, Russia would have made into top five. So this specific rating, doing business ranking, they stopped making it because the criteria were not so clear-cut. Therefore, when it comes to a single chilling chain, that's a good thing. And now the government stepped in with providing the needed digital infrastructure. Thank you very much, colleagues. We have 2 minutes left. We may take questions from the audience, just one. If there are no questions, then I announce this session close. Or are there any questions? We are staying within the deadline, within the timeline. So I wish all of you good and productive work, both this and next year, because we have a challenging year ahead of us, to fairly say. Thank you.